Hi, I'm Alan Anand, Vedic astrologer. Today I'd like to spend a little time talking about the chart of Paris Jackson. Now, her name came up recently as reported by TMZ that she'd attempted suicide last month. Now, she vehemently denied this, and I'm not here to, speculate as to whether that did or did not happen. Um, I think suicide or attempted suicide is a tragic circumstance. And, in the last year, we've had a spate of, fairly famous people committing suicide, much to the puzzlement of normal people. Designer Kate Spade, celebrity TV chef Anthony Bourdain, and just this past week, the renowned economist Alan Kruger. Anyway, normal people, we don't understand this, but as astrologers, we should attempt to understand. So back to Paris Jackson. Here you see her chart. She was born 3rd of April, 1998. So she'll be 21 in a few weeks. So what's notable about this chart? Well, the first thing you might notice is that the kendras are entirely empty. There's a saying that goes to the effect that for the person who has absolutely no planets in any of the kendras, life is going to be difficult. It's hard to make your mark in any way, to succeed in any significant endeavor. Now, before we jump to conclusions and accept that as an absolute truth, we should be reminded that some very notable people, for instance, the famed designer or inventor Nikola Tesla, had a similar chart where there were no planets in the kendras, and there is no arguing, his incredible scientific accomplishments in the world of electricity. Now, back to Paris Jackson. So, it's easy to spot, no planets in kendras. But the next thing that might jump out to those who are familiar with looking at this is that Rahu Ketu splits the chart in two, and all of the planets, well, I should say the vast majority of the planets, are on one side of that axis. Now, there's a lot of speculation about, whether this constitutes a Kala Sarpa configuration or not. A lot of people are both fascinated and horrified by the concept of Kala Sarpa, which, seems to threaten and promise things at the same time. And, who's not fascinated by such a complex thing? I became so fascinated about it that I spent a year and a half researching and writing a book on the subject. There it is there, and I hope that you can see that clearly despite the reflection. Kala Sarpa, and I'm not here to talk about Kala Sarpa today either, because there's something else that's much more interesting in their chart, in the context of this attempted suicide. But Kala Sarpa is part of the backdrop. So there are, various varieties of Kala Sarpa. There's pure forms and there's less than pure forms. Hers is what we call a kind of a type 4. The most common of Kala Sarpas. Here's the Rahu Ketu axis, roughly at 15 degrees. Notice that Venus lies on the outside of that axis. So some people would discount that and say that's not a Kala Sarpa, but it is one of the Kala Sarpa varieties, of which there are 4 types, and my book goes into this in painstaking detail. Anyway, here's the key thing to note. Dispositors, well, first, Rahu in the 5th house. Because Rahu is so concerned with, pleasure and accomplishment and a mundane experience, it doesn't do very well in the 5th house, which tends to be about, mental acumen and critical thinking and spiritual practices and so on. So Rahu in the 5th doesn't do very well, and in a Kala Sarpa configuration, it just makes it even more complex. But anyway, there are many ways to assess the import of a Kala Sarpa configuration. One of them being to look and see what planets are associated with or aspecting the the nodes. And in this case, it's only Jupiter and Venus that are on the nodal axis. And actually, that's a good thing. And it does promise Kala Sarpa Yoga as opposed to Kala Sarpa Dosha. I'm going to keep this really simple, though, for the moment, because it is a very complex configuration. That's a lot of strands that must be teased apart and then woven back together to make an interpretation. And again, today's little talk is not about that. But one of the things we do too is that look at the dispositors of the nodes. So Rahu in Leo, Ketu in Aquarius. So both of their nodes, both of the nodal dispositors, excuse me, are in the 12th house. Okay, well, that begins to interest us now because we say that, you know, the outcome of this configuration may hinge around themes, activities, locations, etc., that are, you know, associated with the 12th house. Now, in a Kala Sarpa configuration, planets do get bunched up into one side of the chart. But even more to the point, they tend to get bunched up in single signs. And so here you have the case of you've got 4 true planets. Sorry, Sun is not a true planet, it's a luminary. But 3 true planets and the Sun. You've got 4 planets in the 12th house. This is what we'll call Parivartana Yoga. And it does imply, you know, a great degree of concentration, you know, depending on where it's placed in the chart. It can reflect, you know, spiritual purpose. And, you know, the 12th house is not out of bounds for that sort of thing, because the 12th house is what we call a moksha sthana, a place of spirituality, liberation, release, and letting go. And again, I'm still not arriving to the point that I want to get at. Let's look a little closer in here at what's going on in this cluster. Notice that Mercury is retrograde and in Pisces. So this is a very mixed condition Mercury. It's strong because retrograde, therefore bright. It's weak because it's in Pisces. Okay, so that, you know, goes to the rational thinking notion as well that may be, you know, conflicted to some degree. But it's not combust. Mars and Saturn in Pisces, that's considered ordinary, but take a close look at their degree positions. Mars is at 2904, Saturn is at 2815. Okay. So these 2 planets are less than 1 degree of longitude separated. So this is a condition of what we call Graha Yuddha, or planetary war. So basically, when 2 planets, the luminaries don't count, the nodes don't count, it's only the true planets. So Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn are the only planets that can engage in true planetary war. When 2 of those are located within 1 degree of each other, this is planetary war. And although it's possible to determine an ultimate winner, you know, by virtue of their brightness, by virtue of their elevation one over the other, by virtue of their greater longitude, there are various rules, and, you know, they're sort of all subject to a consideration of the whole scheme that they're engaged in. But it's like when 2 heavyweights fight it out in a full 15 rounds of a boxing match. At the end of it, there may be a winner, but at the end of it, both combatants are bone weary and damaged. So if you look in her chart, well, you know, the 12th house can reflect some of those areas of damage or war going on. You know, sleep is one of them. You've got 3 malefics in the 12th house of sleep. You know, so that may be very irregular sleep, troubled dreams, nightmares, etc., etc. But we can also look at, of the 2 planets that are engaged in planetary war, Mars and Saturn, what houses do they own? Well, Mars is Lagnesh, first lord, so that involves the self. Saturn rules the 11th house. You know, the easy thing is to take the people that are represented by the planets and start first there and sort of speculate where a person has difficulty. So I'm speculating. Mars, Lord of the first, and Jupiter, sorry, not Jupiter, Saturn, Lord of the 11th. are respectively the self and the older sibling. So what was his name? Prince, the Michael Jackson's first son. So we might suggest conflict between the two of them of some sort that causes angst. More generally, we can say the 11th house, are friends and acquaintances in one social circle. And we can speculate that there may be a conflict there. She may have been let down by friends. She may be disappointed by her social circle. She may be disenchanted with groups, clubs, and associations that she's become involved in. All of these, could they weigh upon a person to the degree that they would, be so miserable about their lives they might seek to harm themselves? Well, who are we to judge? Um, an interesting thing going on here with all the Kendra lords, Mars, Moon, and Saturn, three of them are located in dual signs and what we call apoklima houses. So dual signs, some indecision and self-doubt and uncertainty, and apoklima houses, sometimes difficulty getting a grip on life for one reason or another. So what else is going on here? The Graha Yuddha, anyway, is potentially damaging, especially as it involves the Lord of the first. Now, there's other stuff going on here. Jupiter and Saturn, if you're alert, you might notice that there's a mutual reception or exchange, what we call Parivartana Yoga. I've written a book about that as well, too. I won't trouble to show you the cover at the moment. Another day, perhaps. So there's this symbiosis going on between the 11th house and 12th house. And again, this is symptomatic of friends and social circles having caused disappointment, or one's hopes, dreams, and ambitions having been shattered to some degree. If we go back to the Graha Yuddha, Mars and Saturn, and look a little more closely at their degree positions yet again, now within the context of Jaimini astrology, which I don't usually invoke too often, but I know enough of the rules to deploy it. Mars is with the highest degrees of any planet here. Mars is what we call Atmakaraka. And Saturn, with the second highest degrees, is what we call Amatyakaraka. So Atmakaraka is the significator of the self, while Amatyakaraka is significator of career, typically. Now, these two are at war with each other, and that also suggests a potential conflict within the self. So, I don't know much about Paris Jackson except what I read on Wikipedia this morning. And she's had a stop and go career regarding a musical performer, a model, and an actor. And to date, really nothing's got traction, and she's hasn't got too far in all that. Does that dovetail with the notion that empty kendras make for a struggle in life and difficult to, get something going? Yeah, it does. And so now we've got both the first lord and the 10th lord. Well, this is really potent in this case because Saturn is not only Amatyakaraka, kind of an abstract indicator of the career, but is also specifically the 10th lord. So first and 10th lord are both at war in the 12th house. It's like a person who does not have a good sense of their own identity and their own career track and what the heck they should be pursuing in life. So, we can sympathize with this. This is difficult, and the resolution almost certainly lies in this Parivartana Yoga, that, once we do this hypothetical exchange in our mind's eye, both planets become stronger by being in their other signs, their own signs. And at that time, too, if we carry Jupiter's degree with it into Pisces, that planetary war kind of evaporates as well too. Well, Saturn comes back into here and doesn't cause any trouble specifically with respect to crowding another planet. But this is hypothetical, but this is the kind of stuff that goes on between the ears of an astrologer as they think about the various ways that this might play out. And I'm certainly not going to discuss this at sufficient length to resolve it all. But what's very interesting about this chart is it's an empty kendras chart. It's a Kala Sarpa chart. It's got a major Parivartana Yoga, and it has a Graha Yuddha planetary war. Now, back to, I said I wasn't going to speculate, but I'm going to make myself a liar. This notion of self-harm, there's a little bit of a history to this. She has apparently been a bit of a substance abuser since age 15, which would be 2013 or so, when she would have been in her Jupiter moon period. Okay, so Jupiter is on the Rahu Ketu axis. Venus, the second lord, which always, is some indicator of one's consumption, food, drink, and other things, including, abuse, substances that we might abuse. When the second lord is on the Rahu Ketu axis, there can be problems. Jupiter there can just make for overindulgence and therefore some risk of poisoning or intoxication or worse. Then she has also made a number of suicide attempts before. So take a note here. Jupiter Mars ran from 2015 up to 2016. Now, in the period of, in the Bhukti of Mars, the Lagnesh involved in a Graha Yuddha, that could very well have been a problematic period in which self-harm might have taken place. Since then, she moved through Jupiter Rahu, often a difficult period as well, too. Because in this case, specifically potent, because she has a Kala Sarpa Yoga, and Rahu is integral to that, and Jupiter lies on the Rahu Ketu axis. So that can also be a period too in which continued, substance abuse of some kind could have been a problem. Okay, bring us up to today. Where are we at now? She is currently in Saturn Dasha, Saturn Bhukti from last summer until, summer of 2021. Well, this is a watch out period. Saturn is one of the planets in Graha Yuddha. Saturn is the major malefic who has the greatest potential to do harm. Mars is the indicator of the self. Mars and Saturn are sort of traditional, enemies, and so their conjunction is particularly virulent. So this is kind of a a problematic era that she is in, and one can only hope that she has the appropriate emotional support from her family. B, that she has professional counseling and support available, for whatever issues may plague her. And the recent documentary, what's it called, Leaving Neverland, that's come out about Michael Jackson and the many allegations that have his fans and family and supporters very much up in arms. That's got to be troubling for her as well, too. So we can understand in the context that this is a very difficult period, especially of late. Bottom line on all this is like, I hope for her sake that this is something that she gets a handle on. If it's true that she did attempt to hurt herself, I hope that she has the support, personal, professional, and so on, to help her, get into a better space. And the Kala Sarpa Yoga in this chart actually is quite promising. And maybe another time I would like to talk about it in the context purely of Kala Sarpa and the ability to tease it apart and put it back together. Anyway, so for anyone who's interested in the subject of Kala Sarpa, check out my book. And in due course, I will write something about Paris Jackson for my website over here, navamsha.com. And indeed, just as a preview too, I'm also working on a rectification of Michael Jackson's chart, for which there are really just two popular birth times, and I'm still sorting that out. Rectification can be simple, but many times it's complicated. Anyway, yet to be determined how that plays out. Anyway, thanks for watching today. Tune in again. Please subscribe and come back and see more of these. Okay, bye for now.